The Warriors made a big move at the deadline after swinging and missing on Giannis Antetokounmpo, who said no to going to the team, and ended up trading Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield for Kristaps Porzingis, a trade that encapsulates the years of horrible asset management and a lack of ability to pivot for other great players when Giannis said no. Kristaps' health is the biggest problem with this trade. He hasn't played a professional game since January 7th. He left that game with Achilles tendonitis. He was also diagnosed with POTS, a disorder of the nervous system. Affected him in the playoffs last year with Boston, and it's affected him at the start of this year. There are reports saying that he's fine now, but there's also reports that don't really know. I feel like the likelihood of him playing a game for the Warriors is extremely low. It feels like they made this trade to fulfill a salary slot that they're going to let go in the offseason. It doesn't feel like this is a player that's actually going to make an impact for the team because of his injury history, and it's just not something I'm confident in for him playing significant minutes for the team. Granted, if Jimmy Butler was healthy and it was Jimmy Butler, Steph, Kristaps Porzingis, I could maybe buy into this. Rick Celebrini is able to work his magic like he did Otto Porter Jr., giving him one healthy second half of the season. He's a spacing big that's 7 foot. He shoots threes, blocks shots. Yeah, he's averaged 17 points per game, 36% from three. He blocks a shot a game. He's objectively the perfect fit for this team. He's a much improved Quentin Post. Quentin Post is the perfect mold of a player you want, but he's just not that good. And Kristaps Porzingis is that player that's really good. When you look at Quentin Post lineups, he's part of 4 lineups with a positive net rating for the Warriors. And, if he can be in positive lineups, then Porzingis can play. And he'd be much improved if he's healthy and can actually play. I still come back to if Jimmy was still on the team and if he was healthy, then I think this could have been something that got the fans excited a little bit. You're trading a guy in Jonathan Kuminga that doesn't play for Steve Kerr for Porzingis, who, if once again Celebrini has to work his magic and somehow turn this guy into a healthy player, which the likelihood of that is it's still extremely low. But if he was, then that's a big 3 that could make some noise. I could see them winning a round or 2 in the playoffs. Maybe making an upset depending on how things go. It's you can't count out Steph, Jimmy Butler, and Kristaps Porzingis, would be healthy in this scenario. I can see the vision, but it has to have a lot of things go right, and the season got destroyed by the fact that Jimmy Butler tore his ACL. If Jimmy doesn't tear his ACL, a lot of different things could have happened. They could have made a lot of different moves. There was so much optionality still, but with his injury, it just sort of messed things up for this season. But overall, they've completely mismanaged their assets throughout the years. They've traded 2 lottery picks and Jordan Poole for basically nothing. Their young core, the second timeline that Joe Lacob bet everything on, and it turned out to be for nothing. They traded the number 2 pick in James Wiseman for an injured GP2. They traded Jordan Poole for Chris Paul, whose contract they let expire. They didn't use it to get another player. They just let it go, and it was just empty salary. And then they now trade Jonathan Kuminga, the former 7th overall pick, a guy they had huge aspirations for, who they didn't send earlier on in his career when he had higher value because they believed he could have been a player, for a complete unknown with Porzingis, who maybe plays, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's a salary filler whose contract expires this summer, and that's it for Porzingis. I mean, throughout the years with Jonathan Kuminga, they refused to go for Pascal Siakam, who led the Pacers to the finals. They could have had him on the Warriors. They refused to go for OG Anunoby, who would have been an extreme upgrade. He's unbelievable for the Knicks, and he would have been unbelievable on this team. Michael Porter Jr., they could have gone for him this season instead of Kristaps Porzingis, but I guess not going for him after Jimmy tears his ACL, I can understand. Jaren Jackson Jr., there were reports that the Warriors are in conversations with Jaren Jackson and the Grizzlies to try and get him, but they heavily focused on Giannis, who was never leading. They were misled by that Bucks organization into believing that Giannis could leave, but in reality, it was just not happening. A trade for Lauri Markkanen because they believed in Brandon Podziemski's potential, and it turns out he has no potential. He is a role player. He's not a star. He's not a future all-star. He's not an Olympic player like he wanted to be. He's a role player, which is fine, but it's the problem with this team and the way they've built the roster is that they have these role players, these guys that should be an 8th man, 9th man, 7th man, but they're putting them in the, they have to play 30 minutes a night because they need it. Because they've poorly built this roster out throughout the years where they need a guy like Brandon Podziemski to go crazy for the team. They need him to play 30 minutes a night and be a star, when in reality, that's just not who he is. They need guys like Moses Moody to play 25 minutes and, be consistent, but he's not. And it really boils down to the fact that they missed a pick on Wiseman. With Jonathan Kuminga, they could have gotten Franz Wagner. They could have gotten Trey Murphy instead of Moses Moody. These are things that they missed. They missed on those picks, and those are guys that are legitimate helping stars on current teams in the NBA, and they miss. And now it leaves them in a hole where they have to rely on just role player guys. Like Guy Santos is playing, minutes on this team sometimes. And now it's just sort of like, Steph, you need to score 50 or we're just not going to score on offense. Their offense has just deteriorated because they've relied on role players throughout the years. They haven't been able to make those big trades. They lucked into Jimmy Butler. He fell into their lap. Nobody wanted him because of his contract disputes, and the Warriors were able to get him for basically nothing. So I'm not going to give them credit for something that fell into their lap. It was luck that they got him. Where the Warriors are currently and why this trade is just such a big failure for me is they've consistently failed to get value out of their assets. They failed to get value out of Wiseman. They failed to get value out of Kuminga, and they failed to get value out of Jordan Poole. 3 players that are young, that showed promise at one point in time, or at least high draft value, and they've gotten nothing. It's shown nothing for them. It's a complete failure from the ownership, who meddled in the team's affair to draft these guys, and they've been traded for pennies on the dollar. And the Warriors have made their bed and they have to lie in it. So I don't really know what the next step is for this team, because now it's just Steph, and maybe Jimmy comes back next year. I mean, who do they trade for in the offseason that makes a significant difference? Steph will be a year older. Draymond's a year older. Their contract situation isn't great. Jimmy Butler's are going to miss most of next year. They're just in a really, really bad situation. They're not bad enough to be able to tank and get a high pick. They're not good enough to be able to win a championship. They're stuck in that middle ground, and they've failed to capitalize and make significant trades to allow Steph to push for a championship, because he's still that guy. He's still really good. They've just not been able to reach that next level as a team, as an organization, to get him a roster that allows him to go compete. And that's the sad thing about it. We probably won't be able to see Steph Curry again in a championship situation unless he requests a trade. And I don't see him ever doing that. He's a one-team guy for life. It's over for this team. They're a middling team that failed to capitalize on any of their assets. They failed to elevate the squad. They're in a tough situation now that Jimmy's hurt, and it's basically over. They have to ride off into the sunset, like Steve Kerr said, basically. They know they're not in the championship contention. They know it's pretty much over. This trade sort of just encapsulates their just horrible management over the years and their inability to buy in around Steph, and now it's just left them with nothing. Let me know what you guys thought of the trade. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Peace out.